Hello, everyone. Welcome to the cert-manager bi-weekly meeting. It's the 6th of March, 2025, and just a trio today to discuss all the latest, most exciting happenings in cert-manager land. We don't have any announcements or shout-outs listed in the doc. I'm struggling to think of anything to announce or shout out. I suppose we've done a lot of dependency bumping and things over the past couple of weeks, but nothing particularly exciting or groundbreaking, really, to know. No releases that I'm aware of. So let's just move on to the agenda and get through that. The first thing on the agenda is conveniently me. This you could construe this as an announcement and shout out if you like. Basically, I've raised a PR an issue rather, sorry, starting a lazy consensus vote among the maintainer team around how we could address changing the default of the private key rotation policy in cert-manager. So for context, currently, when you create a certificate, unless you opt in, your private key will stay the same every time your certificate is renewed. That default, as far as I can tell, has been in forever since cert-manager was first created. It's not the behavior that most people, I think, expect when working with cert-manager. So I've got a proposal in flight to change that behavior to default to always. In that issue, there are two proposed timelines. One brings this feature in at the beta level, so it will be enabled by default. So the default would change in the next release of cert-manager, that is. The other one brings the feature in as an alpha feature gate, so it would be off by default in the next release of cert-manager, and then we'd promote it in the release after. It was essentially how cautious do we want to be around this. In both scenarios, I would be adding a warning to already released versions of cert-manager to tell people what's going to change in this regard, and obviously there'd be the usual like big scary notice in all the release notes. This isn't really destructive for most people unless they depend on this behavior, which it happens but is quite unusual. Effectively, this is a shout out to say go and look at that issue and voice opinions if you have them. Does anyone want to add anything to this or say anything now?
I have a feeling it was a consensus about doing it. It's more a question on how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So far, I've not seen anyone dissenting on the approach proposed in this issue. So unless someone does actively dissent on the issue and say we must do this another way, I will proceed and do it the way that is in the issue. It's just a matter of when. And so far, everyone seems okay with going on the quick timeline, which I like. I think it's high time to
Which
change
option
this.
do you prefer?
I prefer the quicker timeline for sure.
Yeah, so you enable it by default?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't see why this couldn't be a beta feature gate out of the gate. Like, I'm not even particularly like I could be convinced about just changing it, like, but I'm trying to be a bit more cautious. Like, I just think this is something that, like Flynn from Boye, I should shout out. Flynn is actually the one that pointed this out to me. How surprising it was when they were writing docs for cert-manager and like. Yeah, like it is surprising, and it shouldn't be a thing that surprises people, which is why I started running on this one.
Yeah. In our case, it was actually important to rotate the private key. So we actually looked deeply into this, and we were a bit surprised when we started using cert-manager that the default was not to replace the private key.
Yeah, it'll be nice to. I think it's just a wart from the early days, like one of those things that happens in any project that grows quickly. Any other comments? Sorry,
I
go on.
felt like I thought I'd written somewhere in a best practices document about choosing that option, but
Yeah,
I can't find it now.
you did. I think that it would definitely be something to do to update that document and say like, well, run the latest version of cert-manager and then you get it by default, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
But as always, there will be users who are using this in strange ways, which could break. I could think of a lot of ways to create something that would break by doing this.
Yeah, for sure. Like I wouldn't be surprised if someone screams, but what are you going to do? I think it's not hard to view this through a security lens, and security does allow us to sort of justify moving quickly on it. I think, like, obviously, it's not like an imminent security threat to the world or anything, but it is worth changing.
Yeah.
So yeah, if this goes through, then it's a pattern that we can follow for other changes to the API, right? Like maybe we want to change the default for the certificate revision limit, which has always been annoying to everyone. That there's no limit by default, which is crazy. So we should change the default should be 1.
Yeah,
Essentially.
Yeah.
If we want to cover our asses properly, we could even put together a little FAQ of why we're doing this and why we're not bumping the version, and then link it on the announcements section.
Yeah, does make sense. Like obviously, a way of doing this is to create a V2 of cert-manager, but it just seems like so much work, and I really don't want to. It scares me how much that could be.
You start talking about V2 and we sort of talking about what about certificate templates and what about I'll start throwing random things your way.
I think every maintainer has like a pet peeve that they would want to change in a V2. For me, it's moving common name under subject. I hate that it's not under subject, but yeah, I don't want to open the can of worms.
Yeah, but talking about default, at least you, Richard, have seen. I somehow suggested to create an API default of the the issuer group in cert-manager, because now it's a controller default, which used to create problems for approver policy, which didn't default to the same group. So you actually had to define your issuer kind of fully in the certificate to make it apply correctly with approver policy.
Right.
There is an open PR to make it an API default. But again, it's always scary to change these things in the APIs.
Yeah, definitely.
But that wouldn't actually change the default, but the default would actually be more visible in a sense. So it's when you create a new certificate and omitting the group on the issuer, you will see afterwards that it has defaulted to cert-manager.io.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so is that I can't the question there is whether we introduce that defaulting webhook, right? That requires a webhook mechanism.
We don't have a webhook for certificate, as far as I know. We only have a webhook for certificate requests, if I'm not mistaken. So that would be introducing a new webhook. That's why I'm suggesting an API default, which is declared in the open API spec.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I like that idea too, but that we're going off the on a tangent there, aren't we? The change to the private key rotation, would that be a default? I can't remember the API. Is it that if I omit the private key rotation section in the certificate, does the defaulting mechanism add that to the resource, or is it just a controller default that gets applied when the thing gets reconciled?
I believe it's a controller default. I wouldn't bet my house on it, but I definitely, the more I've looked on cert-manager, the more sort of armor I've put on when it's come to like Kubernetes API discussions. Like I at the risk of reducing it down to to be too simplistic, I care very little about like the way that Kubernetes wants it done or all that. I just care about making sure it's changed, and I believe we'll end up in a happy place either way, however we change it.
Right.
But it's an interesting discussion. I personally prefer more explicit default in a sense that you actually see it in the resource after you have applied it. I tend to prefer that, at least for important fields. Of course, it makes your resource bigger, looks bigger, and it could also consume more space in etcd. But in general, I prefer to have those defaults written into the resource. But maybe it's just me.
I prefer that too, but I agree with Ashley. It's not, we don't need to go into the weeds here.
I prefer it in the API, but I always defensively code the actual controller as well.
Yeah, that's always kind of been where I've landed. Like if I'm relying on any one part of this, I just want to not have to do that. Like, don't trust anything else. Like, just have it work everywhere.
That's kind of why I do abuse pointers a lot in my API specs. Well, if I need a want it defaulting, I'll just use a pointer to a string and then use pointer.deref with the default value.
Yeah, that's a controller default. So
yeah, and then but then you can also put a default on the object itself. So it means if like they've got an old version of the API or if hacked it somehow, it won't. It will. The controller will still do the correct thing.
I'm sure there's more to be learned from this. I could believe that it will change in implementation if the lazy consensus passes, but we'll see. I feel like we're probably at a natural ending to that discussion, unless anyone's got anything they particularly want to scream about. But I think probably Erik's is more interesting anyway, so I'm inclined to hand it over to you, Erik. OCI charts.
yeah, it's probably older discussions. But the first point I put on the agenda was around this providing an official home for Helm charts in OCI format. I would really love to see that happen. So I was just putting it on the agenda to kind of maybe discuss a bit more on how it should look like, where should it be located, should it be located in multiple places, how should you update the docs. Right now it's available on K, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Is it worth so you messaged me privately saying that Flux really struggles with repositories, right?
It doesn't struggle with it, but of course Flux is very lightweight compared to Argo, for example. So that's kind of the one of the good things about Flux.
What I should say is Flux like the project, as in like, so Flux were looking to remove cert-manager from their demos, right? Because we don't have OCI charts.
No, it was not removed because it was never added.
Right.
But Stefan wanted to add cert-manager to the demos in the Flux project, because obviously cert-manager is something that you typically will need in a cluster in order to do almost anything. So if we fix this to a official maintained OCI format, he will be happy to add it to both the documentation and the presentations and whatever he does in this area.
I think that's really important. It's like a really concrete example of how not having OCI charts is hurting us, right?
Yeah. Because the old thing in Flux is probably going away. Not immediately, but slowly. Everything will be built around OCI container images.
It does make sense. So if you want
the status, did you just say that we have now published cert-manager charts to an OCI registry? I
They're
didn't know
all
that.
JetStack.
Ashley did a one-time job of publishing a lot of versions of cert-manager, and
Cool.
the sub-project were already available there, but not, as far as I know, this is not public knowledge. It hasn't been published anywhere. It's just by coincidence that it's there. It's kind of work in progress.
Yeah, so the latest, as I understand it, is Tim did a lot of work around getting the OCI charts pushed as part of the release process for all the sub-projects. So they're all now doing what you would expect them to do, really. Like the charts are OCI and they're available. It's using the JetStack K organization, key, whatever you want to call it. I hate the name. It's using that for permissions reasons because all of the jobs can already push there because they push the container images there. So being able to push the chart there is trivial. cert-manager is different because it has CMRel and does all this different stuff. I have a PR which I'm actively working on. It isn't ready to merge, and I probably should mark it as a draft or something because it is very much not ready to merge. But I'm working on it for CMRel, but it's turning out to be an absolute pig to do. I really don't know why it's so hard. I basically tried to copy what Helm's code for doing it from Helm itself, and it fails every time. And I've clearly missed something. I just don't know what yet, and I'm going away for the weekend, so I'll try and fix that next week. But certainly, that's a lot of words for me to say. What I think is the case is once this PR is ready to go and merges, and we have this being published for the cert-manager releases, I don't see why then we couldn't go and update all of our documentation to start pointing people at the OCI images. I think we're in a good place to do that then.
But the question is whether we should continue with the JetStack org on K.
So long term, no. Like clearly, long term, we shouldn't have everything there. Like if for no other reason than the name, but I think my preference would be to keep that separate from the OCI stuff because it's like I say for the permissions model, it's so much easier to just push it there now. And if we keep all of our OCI stuff in one OCI registry for now, then we still have a single source of truth around what's the latest. So when we do the migration later, we're just going from one place to another, be that to a different Quay organization or to GHCR or something else. Like probably, I suspect GHCR might be in the conversation there, but
yeah,
I think that shouldn't be too hard. Like whether it's as long as we push somewhere and then sync elsewhere, it doesn't really matter what it looks like or what direction all that syncing's going. It's just as long as we have one source of truth for what's correct and everything else gets synced as appropriate, I think that's fine.
I'm just thinking that this hasn't been officially published yet. So when we publish it, which I think we should do at some point, we will have to be stuck with that name for a long time.
Yeah.
That's the only issue I see about starting there. I would love to start somewhere else if it's possible.
I think we are stuck forever though, aren't we? That's basically it's just we're locked into using the JetStack Quay because that's what everyone has in their Kubernetes YAML already. So even if we migrate to GHCR as our primary location, we still have to sync it back anyway. So,
but there's a difference between the Helm chart and the images. At least to me, there's a difference. But
I see where Ash is coming from with wanting the config is much easier to push everything to Quay right now. So that's arguably the quickest win. But that does mean, along with images, we're going to have to support the Helm OCI of JetStack for the foreseeable when we do a migration. I don't particularly mind that, given that whatever automation we write to sync the images could probably just be repurposed to sync the Helm charts as well. So while it's not ideal, I think it's probably fine.
yeah. The other potential thing here is like I think there's maybe a discussion to be had about if I'm installing from like the cert-manager Quay organization, say, I may well want to pull my images from the cert-manager Quay organization. Like if my chart's from there, I might want the images from there. So then we're getting into like, it's not actually just syncing charts. It's we actually need to build distinct charts or like edit the charts. And like by just sticking it all in one organization, we just completely sidestep that because we don't have to think about it. And like to be transparent, that's a problem we're going to have to think about soon at CyberArk. So there may be some ability to sort of work on that as well and like solve it in two places at once. But it's still a thing that like is it's sort of on my mind.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that the best thing to do right now is to try to finish the publishing of the Helm chart in OCI to the Jetstack org, and then make it public and update our docs. Agreed?
Yeah. I'm hoping I'll get it done. Like I'm back on Tuesday next week. I'm hoping I'll get it done at some point next week. It's just like I thought it would be so trivial, and it's just not for whatever reason. But we'll get there.
Yeah. Okay, done with that point. I think I have the next one as well.
You do? Go ahead.
Yeah. It's about an issue. It was actually Ashley's suggestion. I had a PR more like to try out what if we were able to replace some webhooks in Trust Manager with cell expressions. Leaving that PR for later, Ashley's suggestion was to I added some tests here into that PR to actually see if I could extract the tests and run it against the webhook that we currently have. So I tried to do that, and on my first attempt, I did a stupid mistake. I even asked for reviews on the channel, which I had to say, no, please hold your reviews because there's something important missing. Because I need to configure the webhook in the test in order to actually test the webhook, of course. And then I meet the challenge of that the webhook manifest is not available as a simple manifest. It's only available by rendering the Helm chart. So currently I'm working on just bootstrapping the webhook in Go code, but of course it will be a semi-duplication on what's actually would have been in the rendered manifest. So I wanted to ask if anyone has some preferred solution in this area on how to solve this, like before review.
How are we generating our webhooks? Are we hard generating them, or are we generating them using Kube Builder?
We are not generating the webhooks. They are hand woven as a template, which
if they were generated, I'd say just generate them twice and put one somewhere. But
yeah,
the hand woven makes that a
it's the same discussion I had with Tim earlier on with the CRDs. Because it was a similar problem. I needed the CRDs in test and tests. And in all the operators I work on, we generate the CRD and we generate the webhook. That's how we do it, and I like it a lot. But I understand that when the Helm chart is the kind of the official installation of cert-manager and all the other projects, I understand that the Helm chart is more important than to just be something created from some generated things.
Yeah. I mean, I've always not seen a problem with generating the thing twice if it's going to generate from the same source using the same like generator and just whacking things and like deploy CRDs or deploy webhooks. Like just because like yeah, it's not a supported way, but it's there. People can look at it, people can inspect it. If people want to hand roll stuff, it might help. But we can make sure it's not supported. And it's just useful to us to have for these tests. But the fact that it's hand rolled means the only way to get out a canonical version is to Helm template and then run it through YQ with like a filter.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for all kind webhooks, and then that, while that'll work, it makes me sad.
That's not the way I want to do it. That's actually what Ashley suggested. And of course, it's possible to do it, but I'm really reluctant to doing it that way for the same reasons. So what you are suggesting is to actually generate the webhook manifest under the test.
I would be curious to see what the difference is. Obviously, without the Helmcraft and stuff, the Helmcraft obviously is something we have on ours, but the actual difference between the spec of the generated one and ours, I would be interested to see that. Like, could we get the generated one up to parity and then maybe even move the Helm chart onto the generated one?
Yeah, the problem is that you would like to template a bit more. Like for the CRDs, we template kind of around the CRD. So you say whether you should install them or not, and we have something in between. But of course, it adds complexity for making a template out of something, a static manifest, which is generated.
Yeah,
we do have a fair bit of logic in the validated webhook configuration as well. Like, it's not just a simple thing.
Internally here at Epic, I've got a tool that can take the output of the generator, because that could just output standard output, and it can find objects of interest and convert them into canonical forms. Like, I don't know if that's something that we could build for cert-manager in the long run, because it means we could output in various formats from the same source. But what that does is it just takes the YAML stream on the input, goes, for each of the objects I get, is it CRD? Well, I'm going to run it through this template first. And that template can then add the cruft around the top and bottom as need be. And then for everything it doesn't recognize, it just dumps out, like, so it doesn't break anything.
The problem is the things in between. Top on the bottom, that's simple, but in between, that's more complicated.
Oh yeah, but you deserialize the YAML, you have access to the entire thing, so you can then just like mess with the metadata and then just verbatim certain things, and use the Helm template functions to just use the Golang template functions to mutate any fields you need changing. Like, it's doable, and that's what I've done, because I have injected some fields and annotations, and I've injected some fields in the spec. Like, that's what I've done for Epic, but yeah, it's again, it's more work because you're essentially writing a transformer to sit on top of the controller runtime stuff at that point. All you really want is a webhook YAML. And like we were talking about going down, what if we generate the official one? Then you could generate it twice. But really, all you want is the webhook YAML. I mean, the nutty thing of it is just saying, if this is hand rolled anyway, why don't we just like template it out, put it in the registry, and put a comment on top saying, please update this if you update the Helm chart.
Yeah.
As long as we like put it in like a test data folder, that's probably fine.
That's what we've done with the CRDs, if you remember. So we could do the same for a generated webhook. So to me, I'm actually have plans on finishing this work. To me, there are two options that I think are okay. I'm okay with, and that's the one that you suggested, to generate just a manifest, and you use the manifest in the tests. It's located in the test folder, so it's clearly marked that this is not the production install of anything. Use the Helm chart. The other option is to just create the webhook configuration in Go code, which I've started on now. Going and rendering the Helm chart and then massaging it with YQ is not something that I consider a solution, really.
If you are generating it through the generator, we probably have not got the right comments in our code to generate it correctly. So you will need to go and add those comments in. So
of course, but those comments are very simple. So yeah. Any other thoughts here?
I'm going to be boring and just say like I don't really mind. I'd rather that we be fairly confident that we're testing against the same webhook configuration that we would actually deploy. I'd rather that for obvious reasons, but I don't really care that much. We don't change the webhook. Like, I think
You can always
the configuration doesn't change much. The last time it did change was 8 months ago, and that was me doing the Helm stuff. So like, there's a risk of like overly worrying about it and delaying features that would be useful. Like, I'm just not too bothered.
I agree with you. In this case, the only thing I need to do is to make the control plane in Testan aware of the code that executes the webhook. That's the only thing. It doesn't have to be the same webhook to me. It just has to run the same code behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I'm also like of the opinion that if we do the path of least resistance now, we can always have at the same time raise an issue to say port our Helm webhooks to be generated by code generation, and then that issue can then improve things in the future. Like in the goals, we can say we want our Helm webhooks to be generated the same way our Helm CRDs are, so that we can also dump them in a test data directory for local testing. We can create an issue with that, someone can pick that up as and when.
Nice. Then I will do that. Richard, do you have any opinions on this?
Sorry, Erik, I had to move to a different location. I just don't have the context. I don't know enough about it to have any real input. Sorry.
That's okay.
So is it that you attempted to do like what do we call it? The CE, where you put CEL validation in the API structs. Rob, did you try and abandon having a separate validating webhook?
Yeah, I was trying to that, but that's not feasible at the moment. And we need more advanced feature in the cell, but at least it replaces a great amount of code. And in order to test that properly, I would say the right way to test this is using Testan, a simulated control plane. So the idea here is to introduce the tests before we do the change to introduce cell eventually, to do the same tests against using the webhook.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we're writing validating functions for a validating webhook, it's quite easy to write unit tests for those validation functions.
Yep.
Don't Kubernetes provide some sort of framework for testing the validations that you define in CEL expressions?
Not as I am aware of, but I think the recommendation
is that even what you're talking about? Because you've just said you couldn't do what you needed to do with CEL, so you switch. Remind me what's happened.
When you add CEL, it's actually added to the CRD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the moment, is there like a hybrid approach? Some of the validation is CEL, and the more complicated things are done using validating webhooks.
Right now, we only use webhooks. That's the current code in Trust Manager. So I wanted to introduce some tests, which I could then take over to kind of, they will survive migration to cell, either partially or fully. Yeah.
So the suite of tests passes with the entire webhook, the entire validation performed by the webhook. You move some of the validation to CEL, and the tests continue to pass. I see.
Yeah, and ideally, I will be able to move all the validation to cell and remove the webhook, because webhooks are not very nice from an operational point of view. So as an operational person, I would love to have fewer webhooks.
Right.
Yeah.
Off the back of this as well, you mentioned, Richard, having a test framework for testing Sal. Off the back of this work, we would have that because we're Eric's talking about writing tests for the webhook, which then would survive the transition to Sal. There's nothing to say in the future when we are theoretically fully ported to Sal that we couldn't add more tests as we add more validation.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. I just want to add some tests to prove that the migration to Cell is actually working the way it's supposed to work. Because removing the webhook will obviously remove the tests of the webhook that we currently have.
The nice thing about the unit tests for the validation functions, though, is that you can supply snippets of the API, not a full-blown certificate or trust bundle. With the env test approach, you would have to supply full bundles every time. And is it easy to like those combinations where all you're interested in is checking the validation of the private key features of the certificate in a cert-manager scenario, but you don't want to have to worry about all of the other parts of the certificate. I'm rambling. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know what you mean, but I mean, that's just life.
Yeah.
As far as I know, this has to be tested this way. I probably like testing with a control plane more than some of the others in the team, but and that's okay. But in this case, I don't see a way to actually have the test as simple Go tests.
I think there's definitely like, I'm sure someone in the Kubernetes world is working on enabling that at some point, but I'm not aware of anything.
We're not aware of anything. I like the idea of testing against a row control plane. I just hate that it does not work nicely with like IDEs and stuff, like because everything's in the make file to pass in like setup env test and stuff. Like there's no nice just like click run test and it works.
Yeah.
Not with faffing around with your IDE config.
Yeah, it works in my case because we have installed all the tools, so they are available to my IDE. But of course, it's not in the exactly correct version, but that doesn't really matter. Yeah. I always run it with make afterwards.
We talked about like defense in depth, like you have the validating webhook and then you validate again. Well, we were talking about defaults before, but you might equally have controller, or maybe you call it runtime based validation in the controller for those in case the validating webhook isn't working. Do we do that?
It's too late, I will say. It's too late. The resource is already written to etcd, and the user, there's no way to make the user aware of it or the process that modified the manifest.
I mean, you made events telling them they've done fucked up, but you can't it's not something they get like on deploy telling them where they're wrong. It's something they have to go check. Why isn't this worked? And they have to debug.
Yeah. Example, we have our application operator, which creates a lot of Kubernetes resources under the hood. And sometimes we discover that we are missing some validation in our application API, which is resulting in the controller just failing and having to put conditions on the application that the user hopefully can see it. But there's nothing we can do about it. It's too late already.
Yeah, not unless you have one thing we did at an operator I previously worked on was have a startup runner, which the first thing it did was a fix-up job, and it would just go around the cluster and fix all the broken YAML. Like from the fact we had a migration of a field that broke some stuff, like to the point where it wouldn't unmarshal. So we had like a fix-up job that unmarshaled to unstructured, fixed the correct schema, and reapplied it. Like there are ways to make it like automagical. It's just none of them are nice.
Yeah. But you didn't have any opinions around the test setup issue about the webhook the manifest is only available as a Helm template at the moment. So
I think you're picking a fight, Erik. I think I disagreed with you strongly about the CRDs before, and I still disagree. I heard you say that you don't want to do like the YQ filter thing. Well, why not? That seems perfectly okay to me.
Okay. So you're in Tim's camp. That's okay.
I'm in Tim's camp, yeah.
Yes, that's fair.
Where we start.
You roused me. I turned off my video. I'd gone away, and you brought me back. So you've only yourself to blame.
This is where we start forming divisions with the cert-manager maintainers between like anti-YQ hacking and pro-YQ hacking, and we start an internal war. Well, I'll meet you all at KubeCon and we'll have this out, the field of battle.
But I think it's interesting to talk about it. I mean, differences are okay. I mean, different opinions are the way to go.
Yeah. And I respect the appeal of having a single source of truth. Same way I'm sure you appreciate that I consider as long as they're both generating the same thing, that's a single source of truth-ish. Like there's so many ways to look at this, and it's just as long as we can all communicate fairly and follow the CNCF code of conduct, then everything will be fine.
I should have mentioned that at the beginning, shouldn't I?
What meaningful differences could there be anyway in the webhook configuration? I've forgotten really. It's just pointing. It's saying this resource is going to be validated by this endpoint. What's the risks of them becoming out of sync?
It's very unlikely, and in this case, as I said previously, my only goal is to ensure that the code that we have written to represent the webhook is actually executed in my tests. Yeah.
Right.
So the webhook configuration is only an intermediate goal to actually make that happen when using test-env. Yeah.
Right. Do you even need an API server? I mean, can you just send a blob of YAML directly to your webhook endpoint? I'm prolonging the discussion. Sorry, that was just a random thought.
I think the format is a bit different then.
You can send random stuff to a webhook endpoint, but then it'll be a pain. Like if you've already stood up an API server, then just hit the API server.
Yeah. But I will finish the PR and then we can continue there. I've got a lot of input here. Thanks a lot. We're running out of time. Maybe someone else had anything, or is there anything more on the list?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Erik. We are running late, and I've got a long weekend coming up, so I'm eager to get into bed and catch up on sleep. So, did anyone have anything else they wanted to bring up?
I pledged last time to look at that Route 53 thing. I've looked at it, I've reviewed it, and given some feedback, but it's back in my court because the person who I fed back to doesn't want to revisit it. So I pledge this time to actually address my own feedback. I noticed Goodness is here as well, and I feel guilty that I haven't yet reviewed his tutorial. I'm not going to pledge to do that because I just don't think I'll do it. But I haven't forgotten it.
I would say thank you for joining, Goodness and Yvonne. Do either of you have anything you want to bring up? I will take silence as a no.
Not quite. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Hi, guys. So not quite. Still kind of waiting for the review from Richard. But apart from that, I've been taking a look at the documentation, and I feel like there are other places I could touch. So probably I could touch bases with Richard later, then we could see if we could make changes to some of the other documentations while we wait for, the review of the other one.
That'd be great. Just small changes, little changes. I encourage those little rewording a paragraph,
little
clarity.
changes,
yeah. If you're I'll tell you what you could do. If you know Next.js, why don't we remove the list of all the versions? Like, why don't we just have the last 4 versions of cert-manager in the drop-down list? It drives me nuts.
Okay, sure. If you have changes that I could implement, you could send them over via Slack, and I could take a look at it.
I'm not going to promise it. I'm not going to promise to send you anything, but yeah, I'll review small website changes.
Yeah, I would always encourage you to post in the cert-manager dev channel on Slack if you have anything you need reviews on as well. There's plenty of maintainers. Yeah. Nobody can promise you a review, but like it certainly increases your chances of getting a quick review on something if you post it there.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Smashing. Well, it's 5 minutes to, so I think we're coming towards a natural conclusion. Richard, I've added an action item for you to keep handling the ticket you pledged to handle. I'll even click the little tick box on the last meeting notes to say that you handled it. Beyond that, I'll thank everyone who joined today. Thank you to anyone that watches for some godforsaken reason on YouTube. I assume these still do get uploaded to YouTube. Like and subscribe, and I'll start the recording. See you in 2 weeks.